welcome before we start and introduce our amazing speakers. My name is Jordan, and I am a part of the Art of Living research team specifically for healing breaths, and we do the efficacy of our programs with healthcare professionals specifically. I am so happy to have you here today, joining us for this amazing presentation on breathing, sleeping, and thriving, taking the ancient wellness techniques and framing them from a modern scientific context. We're so happy to have you. Beside me is Dipali. She is amazing. And we have our two speakers, Professor Ronnie Newman. She is an award-winning Harvard University-trained researcher, educator, and published author in the field of mind-body medicine. She has been an invited speaker at the National Institute of Mental Health, FDA, the United Nations, and the World Bank. She is also the founding director of behavioral health research for the Art of Living Foundation and has been a certified meditation teacher for 40 plus years. A lot of experience. And second, we have Dr. Vatsav Raman. He is the Director of Scientific Research for the Art of Living Foundation's practices in North America with a PhD in molecular biology and genetics from Cornell University. He works at a global life sciences company. So they're sitting right here in the front row. Dipali is going to make a few introductions first, and then we will continue with the presentation. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dipali. I'm a physician at Southwest General and a new teacher for Art of Living. I was very excited to welcome our research team in Cleveland. So we organized the event. Our big supporters are American Indian Association of Indian Physicians of Northeast Ohio, President Dr. Vikram Kumar, and Association of Indian Physicians in United States, that's API, the president, Dr. Mona Gupta. We'll introduce them as our supporter, as well as we'll give them a bouquet for recognition and supporting the event. We are going to start the event very soon. We have Dr. Vikram Kumar at this point, and API president as well as API regional director are going to join soon. So we'll start with recognition for Dr. Vikram Kumar.
Thank you. Thank you, Dipali. Thank you so much for having us here. I think it's a great moment that I am going to be a student today. I'm going to be learning how our traditional medicine in the United States, and of course we come back from India, which is another way back medicine goes there, but how to integrate it with this art that we sometimes do not know much about. So thank you all, and I'm representing the physicians of Northern Ohio, and I see many familiar faces here. Thank you everybody for coming. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, Dr. Vikram Kumar is a current president of APNO, and he's the chief endocrinologist at Fairview General Hospital. He's also a chief of medicine for University Hospital Elyria Medical Center. So thank you, Dr. Kumar, for all your support.
Okay. And without further ado, we will welcome up Ronnie and Vatsav. Looking forward to it. Amazing.
This is great. And the first thing I want to do is thank everybody. Thank you, Cleveland, for giving us such a warm welcome. I feel like I have a second home here, and I've only been here 3 days. And despite the rain, despite the wind, which is so different from sunny Florida where I live, I feel really at home here. So thank you so much. And again, I'm really excited to be here because what we will be sharing with you is the merger of ancient wellness techniques with modern science. And it's very close to my heart because I learned these breathing practices several decades ago when I was a graduate student at Harvard doing conflict resolution research in the Middle East. And I developed mystery illnesses and trauma, and the best medical schools in the United States, Harvard Medical School, and my father was on the faculty of Einstein Medical School. Nobody could figure out what was going on in my system. And it was the breathing practices, these evidence-based, standardized breathing practices that gave me my health and my vitality back. I was sleeping 14 hours a night, and now I can run circles around my 20-year-old nephew. So I'd like to share with you the science behind why these practices make us feel great. And Vatsav is going to do the first part of our presentation.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me well? Is this good? Okay, thank you so much. Thanks, Ronnie. I just want to take a little minute to focus on you guys and what brought you to this little seminar. What prompted you to come? Just want to hear some perspective. So anybody wants to share why they came today? Yeah? Okay. Sleep issue. And you're exploring other techniques. Okay. Anybody else? Yeah. Yeah. Ronnie, we can hear you.
Oh, sorry.
You want to integrate the modern with the ancient, see how you can offer more to your patients. Yeah.
I would second the same.
Yeah.
People come to me and endocrinologists because of hormones and thyroid, and they want to pill and they want to fix.
Right.
Don't pill fix.
Right.
Understand that there is more going on here. That they
Yeah.
them and teach them how to make their life better.
That's beautiful. Oftentimes patients come for a single pill fix, whether it's endocrinology or any other issue, but it's really just not a pill, right? It's more of a lifestyle that needs to be addressed. Maybe other things that they could do that could add on to whatever solution we have from modern science. So this is really a revolution in the way people are thinking these days from like 20 years ago. People are thinking more in terms of lifestyle, being healthy. And the physicians are also, it's reflecting on the physician's mindset too. So it's no more a pill fix. And I work in the biotech pharma industry, so I am in that pipeline where we develop drugs and launch drugs all the time with cell therapy, gene therapy. But to me, this is equally important. I think we need to dig deeper into our traditions. There's a lot of healing and a lot of solutions there that have already been figured out, and they really complement each other. They're not, they don't fight against each other. They really are there, and there's a way for both to coexist and add synergistic power, right? So that's where I want to start. And I want to start a little bit with the traditional way of approaching this, and then Ronnie will pivot to the science and what the science has shown. And in yoga, the word yoga really means union, to yoke, right? And it really means to unite the body, mind, and spirit, right? And the context of health, just the body being healthy is often not enough. If your mind is not healthy, if your mental health is not right there, then your body gets affected eventually, right? And that has been shown in science too, by stress hormones and endocrinology and all of that. But in yoga, they've recognized that all of this is important. So you need to, the health is truly defined by your body, physical health, as well as mental health and spiritual health, right? That's where it comes from. And they have found these hacks by which, by doing certain things, you can have a say on the mental health, right? And that's where we can really rely on these techniques because they can really, they're simple to do, everybody can do them, and it's an easy way to hack into our mental health and make it better, right? And to understand that a little bit better, I'm going to talk about the breath specifically. Yoga is so big, but today we're focusing on just the breathing aspect that is part of yoga. And one of the things that the yogic tradition has said is that the breath is related to your mind, your state of mind, right? and that is the way you breathe, the rhythm in the breath, all of that can be reflected by your state of mind. And this is kind of obvious if you look at it, like if you're looking at different emotional states. So if you're looking at people who are angry, they have a certain breathing pattern, right? People who are sad, they have a certain breathing pattern. And all of this has been mapped in yoga a little bit. So they can tell you how you're feeling and what you're thinking by looking at the way you're breathing, right? And it's phenomenal how that is, right? And what is even more phenomenal is that not only does your emotional state or state of mind reflect on the breath, your breathing, by changing the breathing, you can have a say on the state of your mind, right? So oftentimes, what we try to do when we feel something negative, so if we're feeling angry or depressed or sad or worrying, we know it's not a good feeling. And we often tell ourselves, don't feel this way, it's not going to help you, right? We know it's not good to feel it. And then we just lecture ourselves, okay, don't worry about this is not going to help you. Don't be angry, this is not going to help you, right? But how not to be angry and how not to be worrying at that moment, we don't have oftentimes a technique or a toolkit that we can work with. And that's where the breath is a huge savior, because it is something that we can control, right? It is voluntary to a certain extent. And by changing the pattern of breathing, we can have a say on our emotional states, especially when you're in the moment and you're going through that, right? And that is what Ronnie is going to delve deeper into. So before we go a little bit into it, yoga really talks about different tendencies that we have in our mind that are often counterproductive to what we want to do in life, right? And one of those tendencies, and these tendencies kind of hold us back as well in life. So one of the tendencies you might have heard in other ways is that the mind vacillates between the past and the future. Meaning the thoughts that we have in our mind, they are either from the past or from the future. That's how the thoughts are, right? Now, what is wrong with having thoughts about the past or the future? Oftentimes these thoughts don't come alone. They often come with an emotion attached to them, right? The thoughts that come from the past, they typically tend to be sad thoughts or angry thoughts, right? There's an emotional component to it. And these are usually thoughts that we ruminate on. When something happens and it is sad, a sad event happens, the mind keeps going back to that same event again and again and again. Or if something happens that has triggered anger in you, then the same thing happens. So, the past thoughts often bring a lot of these emotions, typically negative emotions, to the surface, right? And then with the future, the biggest emotion we all know of thoughts that come from the future is worrying, right? Anxiety is huge, and usually we go into the future because we're worried about something. So these emotional states, obviously, they're not great for our physiology. They trigger a lot of different reactions, responses in our system, and 10, 20 years down the line, we start developing all these diseases that come from these emotions, these negative emotions, right? So managing the negative emotions early on is a great, it's really it's a treasure. Like if you have a tool that we can manage our negative emotions right from childhood, you're putting away so many diseases. And now the WHO is saying that most of the diseases that we're seeing are stress-related diseases, meaning these are the negative thoughts that are causing those diseases. Now the question is, how do we bring the mind back into the present moment? Meaning, when the mind is vacillating like this, past future, how can we bring it into the present? And that is where the breath can help you. Using the breath, we can anchor the mind into the present moment, and it's far more effective than telling yourself, don't think of this thought, or don't think of this, or don't feel this emotion, right? So it's such a hack that we have, and we'll also give you an experience of it in a minute, but that is one of the tendencies. Another quick tendency I want to touch upon before we do an actual technique and learn a technique right now is that the mind tends to cling to the negative. Have you noticed that? Oftentimes the mind, your whole day, a lot of positive events, a lot of good events, but if something goes wrong during the day, at the end of the day, we all keep thinking about that one thing that went wrong. We recognize that, right? I can give you an example. I'm going to take Ronnie as an example. She's going out to a party maybe in the evening or a dinner, And she's dressed up really nice, and then maybe she runs a Jordan here, and Jordan's like, "Hey, Ronnie, you're dressed up really nice. Where did you go shopping? You know, this is amazing." And Ronnie's like, "Oh, this is my night. Everybody's, you know, kind of praising me about how I look, how I put up." She runs into me. I give her some compliments. She runs to a couple of other people. Everybody's complimenting her. She's having a great night, right? And then she runs into maybe Dipali, and she's not having a great night. So looks at Ronnie and says, "Hey, Ronnie, you look great, but the shoes you're wearing just don't match your dress. Like, why did you choose these shoes?" Right? And so for the rest of the night, what is Ronnie going to think about? The shoes, right? And we're all wired this way. This is a very funny example, but in life, this is what happens, right? Our life is good for the most part, but we cling to that one thing that is not working or is not good, and we expand it to our whole life. And then when you ask somebody, "How are you doing?" they're saying not so well because of this one incident, one thing that is not working, right? So, you know, it's actually validated by science too, that the mind, I forget the name of the scientist, but they said the mind is like Velcro for negativity and Teflon for positivity. It just loves negativity. It just keeps attracting and attaching itself to it. And actually, you know, from a biological standpoint, this is important for survival, right? We have to remember these negative events a lot more than positive events so that we don't repeat them. Like, for example, you're touching fire as a child. This is not a good event. Never going to touch fire again, right? Good for survival. But in this context of this day and age, we overuse this tendency so much that it actually is counterproductive to health, right? We keep clinging to the negative, and that is pushing our health away, right? So what do we do? How do we reverse this tendency? The breathing techniques, again, can help with that. The breathing techniques actually sort of rewire your brain a little bit so that you're more thinking about the positive and not so much attached to the negative. And all of this has been recognized in this ancient tradition. Isn't it amazing? It's really cool, right? Anyway, enough talking. We're going to do a little technique. You guys ready? So we're going to do this breathing technique called Bhastrika or bellows breath, and I'm going to invite Jordan to demonstrate because I have my mic. So it's a technique we're going to use a little bit of hand movement with the breath, and I'll just break it down to you once Jordan does it. It's a powerful technique. It's called Bhastrika in Sanskrit, and it is translated to bellows breath in English. And bellow is that thing that, you know, those of you who know recognize it's the thing we used to stoke fire back in the day when we still used fire to heat. So that same action we're going to get in the diaphragm of the stoking of the bellow, right? And we're going to use our hands to help us with that action. So it's going to look like this. So Jordan will demonstrate, and then we'll all do it together after he demonstrates. I'll break it down. Just relax. Let's look at him. All right, go ahead, Jordan. Do a couple of Bhastrikas. All right, thank you. Simple, right? So Jordan, just stay here. So we start with our hands in loose fists in the by the shoulder, kind of like this. And then we take a sharp in-breath. And as we are breathing in, we bring our hands up. Let's do that. And we breathe out and bring the hands down together. All right, let's do that one more time. Breathe in and out. All right, you guys got it. So only a couple of things. You want to breathe only through the nose. We're not using the mouth. And it is a little bit of a sharper breath than normal, right? So if you do need to blow your nose, I'm not sure we have tissues. But all right, just do it subtly. But you do want to move that air in and out through the nose a little bit fast. So let's do it together. We'll all do it together. And if you do need to open your eyes and look at Jordan, you're always welcome to do that, okay? So for those of you who are comfortable, you can go ahead, close the eyes, and make this experience internal. And then we'll start with hands in loose fist by the shoulder. Let's take a transition breath first. And let go, relax. And together, begin. In, out, up, down, 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 and relax. Relax the hands on the lap. You can go ahead, open the eyes. And Jordan, you can sit. Thank you. If there's just one thing I wanted to point out is we open the hands on the top, right? We're not punching the air. Most of you were doing it right, just a couple, and then bring it back down. That's it. We'll do another round. We'll do a couple more rounds. And this time we will continue with our eyes closed. We'll challenge ourselves, keep the eyes closed, and keep our attention inside. So let's close our eyes. Hands in loose fists by the shoulder. Just a transition breath in. And let go, relax. And together, begin. In, out, up, down. In, out, up, down. In, out, up, down. In, out, up, down. In, out, up, down, 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 and relax. Wonderful. Everybody got it. Keep the eyes closed this time. Continue with the eyes closed. And we'll do one more round. Keep the eyes closed. Bring the hands by your shoulders in loose fists. Take a transition breath in again. And breathe out, relax. And together, begin. In, out, up, down. 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 In, out, up, down, and relax. Relax with the eyes closed, hands on your lap. And before you open your eyes, notice how you're feeling. Anything different in your body? Anything different there? And once you're ready, you can slowly open your eyes whenever you want. Okay, good. Anybody wants to share how they're feeling now? Yes. You feel relaxed? Very nice. Yes. You have more clarity. You feel more present and fresh. Yeah. Anybody else feel that? More clarity, more awake, sort of. Yeah. Anybody else? What's that, sorry? It empties your mind, so your mind is more empty. Yeah. You feel more relaxed here in the. Oh, your breathing is relaxed. Okay. Okay. Wow, that's awesome. Anything else? Anybody? You felt high on oxygen. Good. Yeah. You're back in the present. Yes. Nice. Very nice. Yep. That happens, yeah. Sometimes you feel like a current flowing through the body, right? Yep. And how are you feeling now? You're feeling very good. Great. Relaxed, very nice. Yeah. But we're all okay. Go ahead. Your breath is subtle. Uh huh. Very nice. Exactly. So we're learning techniques that are more powerful, that can take less time to bring your mind faster to the present moment, right? So what we did was is a pranayama, one of the pranayamas. There are many pranayamas, right? And already we did maybe 5 minutes of breathing, and we already feel a little bit different, right? But what we're going to learn today is the science of a specific breathing technique. It's called Sudarshan Kriya Yoga, or SKY. It is, I would say, like 100 times more powerful and potent than what we just experienced, in the sense it just releases so much stress and brings the mind to the present moment. About 10 minutes of breathing doesn't even require all this action, just the way you're breathing now, experimenting with the rhythms. And it's just so good. And the research that we have that we're going to show is all with this specific technique. And Ronnie will talk about how the different techniques are actually different. So we all club them all under breathing techniques, but each technique is slightly different. Some are more potent than others. And this particular technique has been really very potent. So we focused all our research on this technique. And Ronnie, over to you about that. Yeah.
Well, I'm really chillaxed. And I'm very energized at the same time. So shall we just dive right in? Great. And we'll do just a little bit of science for those who may not be the physician. You know a physician, you're a family member of a physician, you like physicians, all of those apply. So part of the reason that the breath is so effective is because it directly impacts our automatic or autonomic nervous system. Now, even those of you who are not physicians, you may remember from high school biology that we have this autonomic or automatic nervous system that keeps us going without our attention. But thank God we don't have to remember to beat our hearts and produce saliva. I mean, there wouldn't be much room for anything else, would there? So there are two main branches of our automatic or autonomic nervous system. One of them is called the parasympathetic. And you can remember P for peaceful, P for parasympathetic. It's also known as the rest and digest aspect of our nervous system. It's what's going on right now, where we feel relaxed, our attention is broader, and this is where, as a species, we are intended to spend most of our time. It's associated with longevity and vibrant health, and it helps us with our digestion and all of these functions. Now, when we have this event like sticking our finger in the fire, or being on a picnic and a rabid dog jumps out, and we feel that stress response, that fight or flight response, that's the counterpart to the peaceful parasympathetic, and it's called the sympathetic. And you can remember S for sympathetic, S for stress. And when we feel like this poor lady, that's going on. When somebody goes boo, and you go, and your heart is beating, that's the sympathetic nervous system. And the two of them, you can sort of think of it like a seesaw. If the stressful sympathetic is dominating, which happens in a lot of people, who are under chronic stress, then the sympathetic part of the nervous system is dominating. When we're in that chillaxed state, the parasympathetic is dominating. And then there's a place of ideal balance or ideal homeostasis. Now, when we feel stressed or angry or frustrated or harried or depressed, any of these, we call them negative, meaning the ones we wish we didn't have. When those emotions are dominating, what tends to happen is that the stressful sympathetic nervous system is dominating. And we know that telling ourselves to relax or telling ourselves not to worry Like the mind has a terrible time telling itself what to do, right? Has it ever worked for anybody? Not a single hand, no. But there is magic that can happen because there is one function of our combined autonomic nervous system, which in addition to being automatic, can be voluntarily controlled by us very easily. And anybody want to guess what that is? Yes, respiration, breathing, and because of that, the breath forms this powerful window into the autonomic nervous system and creates a biohack to allow us to have an influence over whether the stress response or the rest and digest response is dominating. And it brings us back to homeostasis rapidly because, as Václav pointed out, the breath and the emotions are a two-way street. Not only do our emotions change our breathing pattern, but by breathing in specific patterns, it's actually been shown to change our emotional state. And there's a brilliant study that was done by a Belgian scientist named Philip Pote, who noticed in his patients that patients who are depressed, they tend to breathe a short inhale and a long inhale. And patients who have anger issues, emotion regulation issues, their breath is, it tends to be shorter or shallower. So he brought people into the lab and he showed them clips to evoke different emotions, which is very common in psychiatric and psychological research, to evoke different emotions. And he had his research assistants scribe down meticulously the patterns of the breathing that they had, the length of the inhalation, the length of the exhalation, whether there were pauses in between, how long each of those was. And then they sent everybody home. Then they brought them back 3 weeks later to the same lab. This time, there was no external stimulation. It was just like our room before we put anything on the screen. And they instructed the patients to breathe in the particular patterns that had been determined before. And I think you can probably guess what happened. Just by breathing in those patterns, people began experiencing those same emotions. So we know that it's a two-way street. And it's a lot easier to control the breath than to control the mind, yeah? Right? Okay, great. So this is why breathing practices are so powerful, and they're sort of becoming the darling of integrative medicine right now, that everybody is talking about breathing practices. But what's important to know, as Václav said, is that every style of breathing, like in Dr. Philip Pote's experiment, creates a different emotional state and has a different outcome. And so it's an error, it's a folly to say that just do a breathing practice, like just do slow breathing. And slow breathing does increase parasympathetic, that peaceful parasympathetic drive, so it has a value. However, there are many components of the breathing that produce different results because breathing techniques are a category, like medication is a category. But you don't use the same medication for a patient who has depression as you do for somebody who has hypertension, high blood pressure, right? They're different. So as health proponents, it's important for us to understand which practice to recommend depending upon the condition of the individual and depending on the goals of people. If people just want to be healthier and have more stamina and boost immunity, there are practices for that. If people have depression, there are practices for that. And some practices, like Sudarshan Kriya, which we'll be speaking about, have a global impact on creating autonomic homeostasis and boosting brain function, hormone function, immune function, and taking people from dis-ease to vibrant health, because the yogic science of breath is a more than 5,000-year-old precise science of health promotion. And it's actually the first health science on the planet to recognize the interaction between mind, body, emotions, and spirit, and the influence that each has on the other, and their impact on both the restoration and the maintenance of optimal vibrant health. So should we jump right into it? Great. So, okay, so this is what stress can do to us. And as Butzoff pointed out, according to the AMA, 65 to 80% of all disease is either directly caused or exacerbated by stress. And yet the statistics are that more than 80% of Americans, and similar numbers in other industrialized countries, report feeling stressed. So it's something that's really important to get under control. And so we're now going to be focusing specifically on Sudarshan Kriya Yoga or Sky Breath. And as you see, the cortisol level, cortisol is, for many people, a very unpopular hormone because it's the stress hormone. And as you see, this was a population that was actually in a rehab facility for substance abuse recovery. And the study randomized the patients to either standard of care or standard of care plus Sky. And you see that after their detox, standard of care did create a significant reduction in cortisol levels. The purple is as after program, and the blue is before. So these are the standard of care patients. However, when they added Sky Breath to standard of care, you can see that the decline in the elevated cortisol was significantly greater than standard of care. It's a potent adjunct. And so this is a, what they call pathologic or a vulnerable, I'd rather call them a vulnerable population, a protected population with a DSM diagnosis. However, there have been a dozen studies on cortisol, and one of the ones that I really love is they brought newbies into the lab, people who are generally regarded as healthy, and they looked at their cortisol levels prior to their first Sky Breath practice. Then they did the Sky Breath, and then they looked at their cortisol levels right after their first session. And their cortisol levels dropped by more than half after the very first session. So it's not taking months to master, but after the very first session. And what's really nice about that study is they also brought into the lab people who've been practicing for between 18 months and 3 years. There's a daily home practice which takes between 10 and 25 minutes. And what they found is that the experienced Sky breathers, when they came into the lab, their cortisol levels were, again, half that of the newbies. And what that means in practical terms is that they are more resilient and less triggered by the same stress that exists in everybody's world, which is pretty cool. Just breathing, and we have this health benefit. And we see a similar thing. Obviously, the fight or flight response is associated with hypertension, high blood pressure. And what we find is that, and all of these studies are published in independent peer-reviewed journals. And so what we find is that both in healthy individuals, the heart rate and the blood pressure come to a more ideal range. And even in hypertensive patients, we see a rapid decline and a rapid improvement in their heart rate. And so if you wonder, like, how can these breathing techniques do this? Well, just a little more science about breathing, because the outcomes of breathing practices, there's actually 4 aspects to our breath, which, if we just think about it for a minute, makes sense to us. We have, these are actually in the opposite order, so. Okay, I'll go back and forth. So, what's going on? Did I miss a slide? Oh, all right. So I'll just tell you. So there are 4 aspects of our breath. There is the inhalation, whether or not we hold our breath after the inhalation. There's the exhalation, and whether or not there's a breath hold after the exhalation. And as we alter the ratio of those aspects, it produces a different signature effect. It's like a thumbprint. It's like a fingerprint. And each breathing practice, depending on how it manipulates these 4 aspects, produce very different results. And so the rate of breathing also makes a difference. Some breathing practices are 3 breaths a minute. Some are 120 breaths a minute. So we can expect it would produce a different outcome. And again, whether or not there are breath holds after the inhalation and the exhalation, as well as the length of the breath holds, also produces a very different effect. And again, whether it's mouth breathing or nasal breathing, and whether it's normal versus manipulation. Some breathing practices, like Ujjayi breath or ocean breath, require constriction of the laryngeal muscles. It's really easy. It sounds very technical, but it's very easy to learn. And those things make a difference as well in the outcomes that are produced. And okay, so we've done that. And so this is just one example. Alternate nostril breathing. How many people have done alternate nostril breathing? Okay, a few of you. What's really interesting about alternate nostril breathing is that it turns out that which nostril we breathe out of activates the contralateral, the opposite hemisphere of the prefrontal cortex, and that there are seats of parasympathetic drive here, and there are seats of sympathetic drive here. So when we breathe in the right nostril, it activates parasympathetic function, and we breathe out of the right nostril, it activates sympathetic function. Isn't that amazing? Actually, I'll tell you a quick story. One of the first presentations that I did on SkyBreath was I was on the community liaison committee at University of Miami School of Medicine, and I was going to a meeting there where we were discussing different practices, and I was speaking with Gurudev Sri Sri Ravi Shankar, who is the custodian of these breathing practices and who has adapted them to modern times. And he told me, we were talking, and he told me about this contralateral. He said, but you can't say anything about that at the meeting because they haven't discovered it in science yet. So this is the beauty of these practices. And so when we do alternate nostril breathing, the end result is an increase in parasympathetic drive and more homeostasis. Now, when we did the bellows breath, the Bhastrika that we all did, you felt the energy from a sympathetic boost, right? You felt more enlivened, and the mind was more focused, right? So we see just from this one example the difference that can be created. And so just one slide going through, because the effect of these breathing practices is holistic. And we all know that antioxidants protect us from many diseases and the aging, and it influences how rapidly we age. And this was a study of police cadets who are a highly stressed population. And the cadets were randomized to regular cadet training or regular cadet training plus Sky. And this study looked at the three major antioxidants, glutathione, superoxide dismutase, and catalase. And what was found, as you can see in the slide, is the dramatic difference, because under stress, antioxidant production declines. And so what this also shows is heightened resilience and increased protection of the entire mind-body complex. And so you see with glutathione and superoxide dismutase, and similar results were found. And this was after 3 months. So this is a pretty encouraging result. There are actually more than 100 studies on various aspects of the mind-body-spirit complex with the Sky breathing practice. And this is one of my favorite ones, and then I think I'm going to turn it over to Vatsav. That or do you want to take it from here? You could take it from here. He's the molecular guy, so.
Sure, Ronnie. Yeah, this is a really nice micrograph showing, white blood cells attacking a cancer cell, right? And what we're going to talk about is the effect of Sky on immunity, specifically with natural killer cells. So this was a study that was done on cancer patients. They first did sort of a level setting with the population of the count of natural killer cells in a control group, and then in a group that was doing the Sky practices, and you can already see that there's more NK cells with the group that did the Sky practices in a general setting, right? And then the yellow graph is just, a group that were cancer patients. Then that group was introduced to Sky, and there are two groups here that you can see on the right graph. One is with Sky and one is without Sky. So the rounded graph that is going up is the one that got the Sky intervention. So more natural killer cells as they started practicing Sky, which is great news for anybody with cancer, because that is your main immune cell that is going to go after your cancer, right? So really good to introduce, someone in remission or, who is in cancer, who can breathe. It's a breathing technique, so they can do it on the bed. So it's a great technique to introduce in an integrative oncology setting. If you guys have any contacts there, this would be great for them. Yeah. And then I think, Ronnie, it's back to you, actually.
We've looked a little bit about the physiology. Let's look at the corresponding psychology. And one thing, is this on? You can hear me? Okay, great. So okay, anxiety, where's our depression slide? Okay, we'll start with depression. So one thing to know that when people are depressed, the sympathetic nervous system is hyperactive, and the peaceful parasympathetic is more suppressed. Now, pharmacotherapy does a great job at reducing sympathetic overdrive, the medications for depression. However, they don't also boost the well-being aspect of the nervous system. So many patients, while the extreme desperation gets lifted, they don't feel the joie de vivre, they don't feel alive, and they don't really meet the definition of vibrant health. So in this study, what you see is we look at clinical depression, and you can see the effects of the sky breath in significantly reducing depression, and it was clinically as effective as antidepressant therapy. There was no significant difference, and yet the authors of this study in the publication pointed to the fact that it is also self-empowering, cost-effective, and that it's a more efficacious form of relapse prevention. And these studies, actually a number of these studies were run out for clinicians more than 6 months, because we know the placebo effect wanes after 6 months. And these results are sustained 6 months and a year later. And then even for subclinical depression, which means everyday blues, that we also see for those of us who fortunately are not clinically depressed, but we may not be as joyful as we wish, that there's also a significant reduction in subclinical depression. And because their dance partners, depression and anxiety, often show up together and are inseparable, we see the same results for anxiety. Now, this study on the left was a study of patients who, despite 12 weeks of standard psychiatric care, which consisted of drugs and pharmacotherapy, they still there was no change in their anxiety levels. And you see the percentages here. That's why there's no error bar. That the group, they were randomized to Sky Practice plus standard of care or standard of care only. And you see that there was a 41% remission rate within 6 weeks of the group that learned Sky Breath versus no change, 0% change in treatment as usual. Now, and not only was there a 41% remission rate, but the response rate, meaning that their anxiety levels decreased significantly, was found in 77% of the patients. Pretty cool, I think. And of course, everybody is very interested in sleep. Now, we know 2 things about sleep. Number one, we know that the sleep hormone, and this is just very basic, the sleep hormone is anybody want to say what the sleep hormone is? Melatonin, correct. Now, melatonin production and cortisol stress response, the hormone, are connected because when cortisol is elevated, it suppresses the production of the melatonin. And that's one of the reasons that people who are anxious or tense and have that chronic stress have difficulty sleeping. That's just one aspect of it. The second aspect of it is that as we age, the amount of time we spend in the deepest stages of sleep, stage 3 and stage 4, which are the restorative stages, it's when the body does its garbage cleaning and gets rid of toxins. We have that deeper level of sleep. That drops dramatically after about age 30. So in this study, they divided the cohorts by age. They were the younger individuals, and then there were the ones who are 31 to 55. And not we, I didn't do the study, I just read it, but I say we because Sudarshan Kriya belongs to me, it belongs to all of us. And so what you can see is that the people who did sky breathing, they spent roughly 3 times as much of their night's sleep in the deeper parts, stage 3 and stage 4, as the age-matched controls in the study. And what's also what I found very exciting, because If you didn't know it, I'm over 31. And what was found in the study is that the sleep patterns of the older breathers was equivalent to the breathing pattern, to the sleep patterns of the non-breathing 18 to 30-year-olds. So it really does turn back the hands of time where father time and sleep are concerned. So. It increases the odds of a blissful night's sleep by a lot. In fact, we teach these programs in prisons and veterans, and one of the most common reports that we get from our program, we've taught 700,000 prisoners across the globe, and the most common thing that they say is after their first breathing session is that they were able to sleep through the night for the first time since they were incarcerated. Okay, so all of that is great about reducing the challenges that our physiology faces from our modern world. However, that's not the definition of health. According to the World Health Organization, and according to common sense and your mother, health is more than the absence of disease. It is a state of vital well-being on the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual level. And that's exactly what we see with Sky, because unlike pharmacotherapy, and I'm a great fan of pharmacotherapy. It has done wonders for humanity. However, there are often side effects. And sometimes it deals with part of the picture, and there's another part that is not addressed with that. Like we were talking about drugs for antidepressants, the SSRIs, because they don't necessarily boost that feeling of thriving and joie de vivre. But this is exactly what is found with Sky breathing, is that it also increases those things that make life worth living. This is a real photo of a woman after Hurricane Katrina in Texas. You know that a lot of people lost their homes, especially the lower income communities, and they were housed in the football stadium. So there were hundreds and hundreds of people living on cots in this football stadium who had lost everything. And our service organization, because we are a service organization, we went in and taught the Sky breathing to the people who were now homeless and living in the center. And this is one of the women who had lost everything and all of her possessions were on her body, and she had just a cot to her name. And what we find is even in populations like this, there's a significant increase in optimism under the most dire conditions. It was the same thing after the tsunami. Art of Living Foundation went into we actually established 28 refugee camps for the tsunami refugees, and we taught our programs there too. And I could spend a month going through the data, but basically even in the refugee camps, we found significant reductions in depression and significant increases in optimism and quality of life, even in the refugee camps. And significant, obviously, reductions in PTSD, which was the primary outcome in this study. So just quickly, the reason, because there are study after study after study shows increases in serenity and joviality and belongingness and social connection and quality of life, and mindfulness even increases with these practices. So, do you want to come now? Okay. So it creates the true definition of health, which is more than the absence of disease, but a state of vibrant well-being. And now we're going to look at what it does to our brains, because none of us would be anywhere without it.
Yeah, so this one was an EEG study, and here's a picture of a Sky practitioner who was plugged into a bunch of electrodes. But the next slide, we're going to look at beta wave activity in the brain as measured by EEG. On the left, you have non-practitioners of Sky as the control. On the right, you have practitioners of a Sky as your subject of interest, right? And so we see a significant improvement in beta wave activity, or increase in beta wave activity in the brains on the right. And what that means is beta waves are often associated with more focus, and these practitioners of Sky are naturally in a state of more focus, and the controls here are actually doctors and physicians. So, a lot of the your activity, day-to-day activity, relies on focus, and the physicians are supposed to be one of the populations in the world that have more focus than a general population. So the Sky practitioners are topping some of you guys. So that is really good, indication of what the practice can do. Yeah. And then we have, so we've talked about, a lot of the physiological effects, but now we start looking at the genetic expression that changes that come with Sky. And there was a study that was done in Germany regarding this. They compared Sky to an intervention of like Nature Walk, which is also, supposed to increase your parasympathetic drive. And this was done in the beautiful mountains of Black Forest. And so, it was a pretty scenic place. So it was a good control, in my opinion. And they did find significant changes in the levels of gene expression in your peripheral blood. They did blood draws and looked at the genes that are changed, the regulation of genes that is changed in the blood. And they did find practitioners of Sky had about 97 genes that were differently expressed right after the practice of Sky. This is right after they did the Sky practice. Whereas about 24 genes were changed when they went for a walk in nature, right? So there's a lot more genes that are changed with the Sky practice. And this is right after they did the practice. So within that 1 hour window, they were able to trigger these genetic changes. So you can imagine if someone has been doing Sky for a long period of time, how much change we can be making at the genetic level. And this is just peripheral blood cells, where we are not even tapping into what happens in the brain or other tissues, what kind of genetic changes are happening because of a breathing technique, right? So this is very profound in my opinion as a geneticist, that just breathing can change expression in a few minutes, yeah. So we're still exploring that, what the actual gene expression changes mean. Some of these genes, they don't have any function reported already. Like someone has to look into it. And Ronnie, looks like there are some few genes that have some. Yeah.
What has been, there have been multiple epigenetics studies done. And for those of you who are not familiar with is there anybody not familiar with epigenetics? Okay, so we used to think that our genetic makeup was like this table. It was set in stone. What you inherited from your parents was it. That's it. However, we now know that our genes are constantly waking up and exerting an influence, or going to sleep and not exerting any influence in a process called gene expression. So are they expressing what they're there for, or are they not expressing what they're there for? Now, some genes you want to wake up because they code for the longevity of our white blood cells, for example. So turning them on is great. Some genes code for longevity. Turning them on is great. Other genes code for things like cancer. So turning them on, not such a good thing. So, and what influences our the epigenetics, whether the genes are, and you can think of it like a light switch that goes on and off. And so if the genes are expressing, the light switch is on. If the genes are not expressing, the light switch is off. And what determines whether the switch is on or off are things within our control, including our emotions, our breathing patterns, the food we eat, environmental toxins. All of these things influence the expression of our genes, which I think is the most self-empowering discovery of science of all times, that just because our mother or our grandmother or our father or our grandfather had something doesn't mean that we have to have it. That our genetic makeup may be a risk factor, but it's not the only determining factor for our health and longevity. And so a couple of the studies have shown, epigenetic studies have shown the prolonging of the life of healthy red blood cells and healthy white blood cells. So, and yeah, so these are good things.
So those are good genes to be turned on, yeah. All right. And then, Ronnie, do you want to explain the Yale study? Yeah.
Logistical comments. We have a special honored guest here that we will recognize in a few minutes. So the bottom line is that if we lived in a world where we had infinite time to do everything that we want to do and everything that we should do, then the breathing practices are really not as critical as they are now. Because, unless you're living on a different planet, that's not the case here. So we need to do what produces the highest yield in the shortest amount of time. What is most efficient? And so a study was done at Yale University because the students there at Ivy League schools are highly stressed, and there are major mental illness issues there, mental health issues, we'll say, at the university. In fact, the statistics are that 48% of all university students in America now present with suicidal ideation. I mean, it's really a major issue. So to address this issue, they conducted a 4-arm study at Yale with evidence-based programs. One of them was the Sky Breath program. One of them was MBSR, mindfulness-based stress reduction, which is very popular these days. Another one is called Foundations of Emotional Intelligence. And then there was the control group. And they randomized the students to all of these different groups. And you can see the results at the end of the semester that the Sky group had significant changes on 6 domains. And in terms of reducing the sympathetic, reducing the negativity, there were significant reductions in depression, mental health disorders, and stress. And there were significant increases in social connection, positive affect. Affect is just a technical word for emotions. Scientists sometimes like to feel good, like they use big words when they can use simpler ones. So positive emotions and mindfulness. The classic mindfulness scale was used, and the Sky group improved on mindfulness without having to do any mindfulness techniques, because when the system is balanced, we're naturally more mindful. And you can see that there was a significant improvement also in the Foundations of Emotional Intelligence also had a significant improvement in mindfulness. Interestingly, the MBSR, the mindfulness group, had no improvement in anything, not even mindfulness. And not surprisingly, the control group did not have an increase in anything either over the course of the stress of the semester. And bringing this back to the here and now, because I know there are a lot of physicians in the room, it's now time, there's not a competition between serving the patient and caring for the physician. As important as self-care for the patient is self-care of the physician. And I love this statement that leaders should expect, in terms of protected time and self-care, leaders should expect physicians to attend to their own well-being and should view self-care as a professional core competency, because we know the effects of fatigue and stress on medical error and absenteeism and turnover and all of these things. And this is very well accepted now. And so people are looking for what's the most effective things, which is a whole nother presentation that we could do on different aspects of resilience building and well-being for physicians. But I want to show you just one final study. Okay, very good. So a study that was just recently published in JAMA Open. JAMA is the Journal of the American Medical Association, for those who don't read JAMA on a regular basis. And what this study looked at, this was a study actually conducted during COVID in Europe. And what they did is it was just published last month, actually. You know, it takes us a while to get things. Again, I didn't do the research, but I own it. And so there are 3 different core aspects that have been identified in physician burnout, which is a major issue in healthcare. And so we see that when we look at the different components, we see that there was a significant increase in professional fulfillment in the Sky group, the group that was randomized to Sky versus the control. And work exhaustion, there was a significant difference in the Sky group versus the controls. That you can see that, and then how the work exhaustion declined significantly in the Sky group. And then if you look at interpersonal disengagement, which is also a major issue, there are many, physicians go into medicine for the joy of serving others. Nobody goes into it because they want to go to medical school. And so this is particularly troubling in terms of quality of life to physicians, that they feel impersonal, they feel disengaged from their colleagues and their patients. And this, again, there's a significant reduction in that. And the overall burnout, the physician burnout inventory showed the significant difference between the Sky group and the controls. And so in terms of where do we go with this, what does this mean for us, how do we adapt it, I'm going to turn it over to our wonderful Jordan demonstrator to speak about how this can happen. Because in today's world, if we want to enjoy optimum health and make the biggest contribution we can to ourselves and the world, we must get our stress levels in check, and we must go one step beyond that and boost the well-being resilience aspect of our nervous system. And from all I have studied, I'm dating myself now, but all I have studied for 45 years of research in integrative health, using the power of the breath is one of the most potent, easiest to learn, and sustainable practices that I have ever come across. So now we're going to go into a little bit of practice. Thanks, Jordan.
Thank you, Ronnie. So I'm just going to talk very briefly about this. The breathing practices in general have a very positive effect clearly on many aspects of your health, whole health, and taking things from a biomedical model standpoint back from anxiety, et cetera, to thriving. And specifically SKY, which has been what we've talked about in this particular context, is offered by the Art of Living Foundation. And the Art of Living Foundation has many different branches, and we teach the programs to different segments of society. So we have one for the general population, which we will talk about soon in a slide or two. And then we have them for students, specifically for the, in the Yale study, for Sky Campus. And we have them also specifically for healthcare professionals, which means the programs and the curriculum is tailored specifically to the healthcare professional population, which means that you get CME credits or continuing education credits for taking the courses. There's a scientific rigor that obviously needs to be met for that particularly. And we work with both healthcare institutions and healthcare individuals within institutions to provide the powerful programs to decrease burnout, decrease anxiety, and attrition. So we've helped a number of institutions across the country in the brief time that we've been doing this. There's 20 plus, actually it's 25 plus healthcare institutions have been served, and over 6,000 healthcare professionals have benefited from these practices. Really what we're trying to do is help healthcare professionals and leaders rejuvenate, build resilience, and reconnect to the joy in medicine. Oftentimes, you see, especially with burnout, there's a huge amount of disengagement at work, decreased sense of personal accomplishment, and those things we're seeing both in the data that we're taking on our courses, which have not yet been published, but they're working in that direction, that they're having an impact, a significant impact in specifically healthcare professional populations. So there's a QR code here. Please, if you are at all interested in getting in touch, I'd love to chat about this, and we can bring in our head of partnerships as well to chat about this as well, Naveen. His email is right above my email, which is right under that on the bottom left of your screen. And there's a brief form on that QR code if you just wanted to fill it out, just to get some more information, and we can share whether or not it'd be a good fit. But actually down the street, right, Akron Children's Hospital, Dr. Rob McGregor, he's the CMO. A lot of positive reviews. His sleep markedly improved, and his blood pressure meds were cut by a third. And he was very skeptical at first. Actually, personally, I was the one who initially reached out to him and spoke to him about it, and he was open-minded, but he was skeptical, and he ended up doing a talk on MSNBC, like on the news, about how awesome it was, and there was a lot of really positive feedback, and has been continued since then. So, if this is something that you're interested, please feel free to do that, and hopefully look out for the data in the future on the courses themselves, and there's plenty of good things that would come from it. So, next we also have these are the courses for the community. Everyone have the opportunity to get, yes? Okay, amazing. And I will be around to chat afterwards if anyone's interested as well. For the community as well, we have 2 opportunities to learn Sky. There's an upcoming course, April 26th to 28th, and they are May 17th to 19th. For the general community, again, if you're a healthcare professional, I urge you to do the Healing Breaths program. It's much more tailored to what you would find to be beneficial, in my opinion. And these two are in person. Healing Breaths is primarily over Zoom for healthcare professionals to adapt to the high-stress environment. These ones are in person. It's wonderful in person. Location is TBD, and then there's some fee information. So if you're interested and in the community, please feel free to look at both of these courses, take the QR codes, and sign up for them there. There's also the abbreviated links to the programs here as well. So I would like to invite Ronnie and Vatsav back up here, and we are curious if you have any questions. Thank you. Oh, actually.
Yeah, before we do the questions, did you want to? Yeah.
Yeah, I would also like to introduce our big supporter, Dr. Mona Gupta from API, and Dr. Satish Kurla. He's in board-certified hematologist as well as oncologist, clinical professor of medicine at Wright State University, who has traveled all the way from Dayton, Ohio. He's been here with us today. His leadership extends globally as evidenced by his role as president-elect for API and his participation in Global Healthcare Leader Program at Harvard Medical School. Dr. Kathula has been named the Man of the Year by the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society and receiving prestigious Hind Ratan Award very soon. A big round of applause for Dr. Kathula. And Dr. Mona Gupta, she is the Director of Supportive and Palliative Oncology at University Hospitals, Associate Professor and President-elect for Women Faculty at Case Western Reserve University School of Medicine. She is currently pursuing a master's in Leadership and Organizational Development at Case Western. Dr. Gupta also served as Regional Director of Ohio and Michigan at API, chair the Education and CME Committee at her alma mater, the Lady Harding Medical College Alumni Association of North America, and her outstanding contribution have earned her multiple awards for Outstanding Leadership and Global Community Leadership Award.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much for coming today. And thanks to Art of Living for collaborating with API. So I'm representing National API along with our regional director, the stellar regional director, I should say, Dr. Mona Gupta, and she has been very active in helping us out in many events. And I'm a lifestyle medicine board certified also, along with being an oncologist. So I always tell people that these are very, very important things that we should incorporate in our daily life. And as physicians, we should be trained and we should be familiar with all these techniques to improve our patient's life. If you educate one physician, we were talking about that last night, the physician can educate hundreds of people. So I think this is very important collaboration, and we thank you for that.
Thank you, Dr. Kathula. And I would like to just say one thing. We heard patient care, we heard physician care, we heard leadership care, and everything starts with self-care. And as you heard, I'm doing a leadership course here at CASE, and what they are teaching the leaders is how to be resilient leaders. And one of the techniques they're teaching us is mindfulness, we heard, and how do we achieve that mindfulness? And we heard emotional intelligence. The two components of emotional intelligence is self-awareness and self-management. So self-awareness is when you know that you are under stress, you're in that parasympathetic mode, which could be personal, professional, in a meeting, anywhere. How do you manage yourself? Mindfulness. And the mindfulness there said is breathing. Even if you take one deep breath, it changes the electrical signals in your brain from red to green. And the way I have incorporated is, of course, I'm in a meeting and I feel something, somebody's pulling my gourd. First thing I do is take a deep breath. And when I'm actually driving, before, every time there's a red light, I stop at the red light. Whenever I'm stopping at the red light, I just take one deep breath, because now I know just one breath changes your signals, and it calms you down. And one more thing is that you stack your new habit on an old habit. So if you want to practice this deep breathing, so if you have any old habit, if you stack on it, it would be easy to incorporate. So thank you.
Question. Yes, that is a yes. We start as early as age 8. We have a program, and then that's a different program, and it's much different from what the adults learn for Sky. It's a children's version of the Sky. And then there's another program from ages 13 to 18 as well, which is for the teenagers. They have a very specific, environment that they go through, stresses through. So we do have a program for that. And we work with many school systems to implement that program as well. We can either partner with your school system here or offer that as an individual community program. And with respect to Alzheimer's and dementia, I'll let Ronnie comment. Yeah.
That's a very good question. It would have to be a really longitudinal study. That hasn't been done. However, we know that, for example, with Alzheimer's, the buildup of tau protein and amyloid plaque, that if the system does that when it's flushed out of the brain, when the brain does its cleansing, we need to be in the deeper phases of sleep. And so that's why quality of sleep is considered one of the risk factors for Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia, because if we're not resting enough at night, then the brain can't completely clear out the buildup of the tau proteins and the plaques. So we would expect, because of the different contributing factors to Alzheimer's and general dementia, that there would be an impact, but a study has not been done, although we'd be very open to one if anybody would.
If you have access to a population, we are open to doing more research as well. So we're happy to introduce a Sky intervention and a control group at the standard of care, similar to the studies here, and we're opening to co-publishing with you for sure. So I'll answer for the general community program. The community program is about 3 hours a day, but it's only for 3 days, 3 consecutive days typically. So Friday evening, Saturday, Sundays when it's typically offered. But now it's offered online as well, so there's a lot of online options. So you can just find a program that fits your schedule and do that. And then after that, you learn a home practice, which you can just do on your own. We give you an app that you can use to continue and do your home practice. However, for the healthcare professionals, it's a little bit shorter, I think. So.
Yes, it's slightly shorter. We have 2 and 3 day options, and it's less time. It's usually between 2 to 2.5 hours for 2 or 3 consecutive days. Depends on the need of the organization, and depends on the needs of the individual. So there's a good amount of flexibility, considering it's a. Yeah, I have. They're outside. Yeah.
And in terms
I'll
of
have
timing,
one too.
there are also courses offered, because the important thing for the community program is it's 3 hours on 3 consecutive days. So sometimes it's offered in the, like 10 o'clock in the morning after the kids have gone to school, before they come back at the end of the day for mothers. It can be offered in the evening. It can be offered in the morning. It can be offered. There's great flexibility, because the only thing that's fixed is that it's 3 hours on 3 consecutive days to set the rhythms in the physiology. And that's it, and then you're set for life.
Does that answer your question?
Right. The Sky technique, when you learn it, it is a very powerful breathing technique compared to most other breathing techniques.
Like energizing.
It is energizing, but also relaxing at the same time. So you have that state of alertness, but at the same time very relaxed, right? So you're focused, very sharp. You're not losing that state of alertness, because oftentimes when we relax, we lose that state of alertness and focus, right? It's often when you're on vacation or when you don't have to pay attention that we access that state of relaxation, right? Or while going to bed. But what Sky does is puts you in a very unique mental state, which is relaxed attention. So you're focused, attentive, but also relaxed. So with the sky breathing, when you learn it, we usually recommend doing it anytime before a meal. So that could be either in the morning or before lunch or before dinner. The only thing is you don't want to do it with a belly full of food. It's hard to do breathing anyway with that. That's the only thing. And then the other techniques you're doing, you know, it depends. There are some techniques we recommend before bed for getting more sound sleep that are not sky breathing, but are the pranayama techniques. Like the Bhastrika we learned today, that is good for energizing. So if you're, you know, if you have to work a little bit late at night and you have to stay awake, but you don't want to have coffee because it'll, you know, it's not will affect your sleep, you can do the Bhastrika. The Bhastrika will give you another 1 to 2 hours of energy to keep going, right? So it all depends on the technique. So there are many different techniques with different purposes. For the sky, it's a general technique. It's good for many aspects of health. We recommend doing it sitting up and, you know, those specific times. But it can, over time, you will see that you will have reduced need for sleep in terms of you won't need 8 hours or 10 hours of sleep to feel fresh. In 6 hours, you will start feeling really, really fresh because the sky is giving you more energy because of the breathing. You're accessing deeper states of relaxation using sky.
So in general, what you're saying, like if I do breathing exercise before sleeping so I can fall asleep, I can do the sky breathing, and in the long term it will stimulate sleep.
Yeah, you'll have better sleep, deeper sleep, and lesser total duration of sleep. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Anybody?
Well, then we thank you for coming. Oh, did you have a question? No. Okay, so we thank you for coming and sharing your beautiful Sunday with us. And really, from my heart to yours, I will say that in my, as I said, in my 45 years plus of research and integrative evidence-based practices, I have never found something more effective or more enjoyable. Because it's actually, we don't do it for the pleasure, like we don't shower for the pleasure of being in the shower. We do it for how it affects the rest of the day. I have never found anything more powerfully effective in all of my years of research at Harvard. I'm currently doing research actually right now at Stanford Medical School. They're looking at the effects of this on, for those doctors, HPA axis regulation in those facing trauma. So if your heart is saying go for it, hopefully this research will put your head in agreement. And we really encourage you, you will not regret it. So thank you for your time and your attention. And if we don't meet again, we wish you a blessed life. Thank you.